All right, so today we're looking at Barito Renewables Energy. You guys sent in their 2023 annual report,
Yeah.
and wow, this thing is a beast. So we're gonna break it down for you, um, really dig into like their fundamentals, see how their growth strategy is working out, and ultimately help you figure out if this is a company that you should be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, no, I think those are all really smart areas to focus on. I mean, geothermal energy is really having a moment right now,
It is.
especially in Indonesia, and Burrito's really, right in the thick of things. So yeah, understanding their financials, their strategy, I mean, that's key for anyone who might be, thinking about investing.
Absolutely. So, big move for Burrito in 2023. They went public. What were your kind of initial thoughts on that IPO?
Well, I mean, it was huge, not just for Burrito Renewables, but for the whole Burrito Pacific group,
Yeah.
I think it showed that they're serious about clean energy, and I think strategically it opened the door for, more international investment. It's pretty interesting to see a major Indonesian player, making such a bold move.
Yeah. And they raised a ton of capital too, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
About 133 billion shares.
It's
I
a
mean,
huge influx of cash.
that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, how's their revenue growth been looking in light of, all that expansion?
Well, they saw a 4.42% increase year over year, which brought them to 594.94 million US dollars. So, decent growth,
Okay.
especially when you consider, the IMF's predictions about the global economy slowing down. I think it points to, there's strong demand for geothermal energy in Indonesia. The question is, can they keep it up? Can they maintain that growth or even like exceed it?
Yeah. Okay, so revenue's growing, but are they actually turning a profit? What do their profit margins look like?
Well, that's where things get a little more interesting. Their finance costs went up quite a bit in 2023, landed at 136.49 million US dollars. And a lot of that is because of the interest on, all the loans they took out for those acquisitions.
Right. Yeah.
So it raises a really important question, right? Is this kind of debt-fueled growth really sustainable in the long run?
That is the question, isn't it? And it leads us to the next, I think, big thing we need to unpack.
Right.
Their debt.
Right.
What's the situation there? How are they managing all that debt?
So they've issued a bunch of bonds with maturities ranging from 2029 to 2038
Oh, wow.
to pay for, all those acquisitions. The key thing to look at, I think, are the debt covenants.
No.
Those terms and conditions that are tied to the debt. Can they actually afford to make those interest payments based on what they're earning?
Right, right.
Are they generating enough cash flow to handle, this amount of debt? Those are the questions I think, you really have to dig into.
Yeah, those are the big ones.
Yeah.
So are they generating enough cash flow to support all of this? Or is it, kind of a house of cards?
Well, the good news is they did report positive free cash flow in 2023,
Okay, that's good.
which is, generally a good sign. But a big chunk of that cash went right back
Oh, of
into
course. Sure.
more acquisitions. So that leaves them with less cash on hand, obviously. It's definitely a balancing act, right?
It is.
They need enough cash to, keep things running, to handle those debt obligations, but they also want to keep growing.
Right, yeah.
It's a tough spot to be in.
It is. So it seems like their working capital management is going to be pretty crucial here. How efficiently are they converting their sales into, actual cash?
Well, one thing that looks good is their average collection period for receivables. It's only 72 days, so that means they're doing a pretty good job of collecting payments from customers,
Okay.
which of course, helps with the whole cash flow situation.
Hmm.
Managing working capital efficiently is important for any company, but especially for one that's growing as fast as Burrito.
Absolutely. So how does all of this affect their overall valuation? I mean, are they fairly priced compared to, other geothermal companies out there?
It's tough to say for sure, since they just went public.
Right.
The IPO created a lot of buzz, obviously. And renewable energy is, well, it's hot right now. There's a lot of excitement around it. But that can also mean, valuations get a little inflated.
Yeah, you got to be careful about that.
Definitely. So I think we need to be cautious, not get carried away by the hype.
So what are the metrics you'd be looking at to kind of assess their valuation? Like, what are the things you'd want to compare?
Well, I definitely look at their price to earnings ratio and then compare that to other publicly traded geothermal companies.
Okay.
See how they stack up. That'll give you a better sense of whether they're priced fairly
Right.
given their financials and their, growth potential. I think it's really important to look at the data and not just get swept up in, the market excitement.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to stay grounded. Okay, so we've talked about their financials, their growth, their debt. even a little bit about valuation. What about some of the things that are a little harder to measure?
Yeah.
Those qualitative factors. What are your impressions of, like, their management team and their overall approach?
Well, one thing that stood out to me was their commitment to safety.
Okay.
They actually received the Zero Accident Award from the Indonesian government,
Wow, that's impressive.
which is pretty impressive, right?
Yeah.
It shows that they're really focused on safety culture.
Yeah.
And I think that attention to detail, that focus on operational excellence, it's a good sign. It can tell you a lot about the quality of the management.
Yeah, I agree. A good safety record often means a well-run company overall. What about their long-term strategy? Do they have any kind of clear competitive advantage, you think?
Well, their experience in the Indonesian geothermal sector is definitely a strength.
For sure.
I mean, they know the market. They have relationships with, all the key players. And those long-term offtake contracts they have with PLN. Right.
Yeah, the state-owned electricity company.
Yeah.
Those provide a lot of stability, in terms of revenue.
Right.
Investors love that. They love predictability.
Yeah, makes sense. So they've got experience, they've got those contracts, they're focused on safety. What else should we be thinking about in terms of their competitive landscape? Like, who else is out there?
Well, they've got access to Indonesia's, incredible geothermal resources.
That's huge.
It's huge. I mean, Indonesia is projected to have the world's largest geothermal capacity by 2030.
Wow.
So Burrito's really well positioned to take advantage of that, that booming market.
Yeah, that's amazing. What about their approach to growth? They've been acquiring a lot of existing geothermal asset. I think they call it green consolidation.
Right.
How does that fit into, the bigger picture?
It's a smart strategy. It lets them scale up their operations really quickly.
Makes sense.
They don't have to start from scratch, build everything new.
Uh-huh.
But integration can be tricky, right?
Yeah. They've got to make sure they can integrate those new assets smoothly, into their existing operations and manage all the risks that come with that.
Right. High growth, high risk kind of situation.
Exactly. It's a bit of a tightrope walk.
So what are some of the other challenges, maybe risks that they're facing moving forward?
Well, I think those high debt levels are definitely something to watch closely.
Okay.
They need to prove they can handle that debt and stay profitable at the same time.
Yeah, it's a tough balance.
It is. And then there's the whole question of, the broader industry trends.
Right.
How is the geothermal market evolving, both in Indonesia and globally?
Yeah. What's the outlook there?
Well, in Indonesia, the government is really pushing for renewable energy. They have some really ambitious targets for expanding geothermal capacity, which creates a really good environment for companies like Barito,
Yeah.
But globally, it's a little more complicated. Geothermal is still kind of seen as a niche energy source, although that perception is starting to change, I think.
It seems like there's a ton of potential, but also a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, definitely. It's a bit of a Wild West out there.
What are some of the key things that you're going to be watching for, in the coming years to kind of gauge their success?
I think the big things for me are, can they manage their debt? Can they stay profitable as they grow? And can they successfully integrate all those companies they've acquired?
Makes sense.
If they can handle those three things, then I think they're really well positioned to, ride this geothermal wave.
Okay, so we've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive into Barito Renewables. We've looked at their financials, their growth strategy, and even some of those harder to measure, qualitative factors.
Right.
But there's still more to explore.
Oh, absolutely. We've just scratched the surface.
More to come.
In the next part, we'll really dig into, what all of this means for you, the investor. What are the key questions you should be asking? What are the things you need to consider before you even think about, investing in a company like Barito?
Sounds good. Can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, it should be interesting.
All right, so stay tuned. We'll be back after a quick break.
See you soon. Welcome back.
So now that we've kind of laid out, some of the key details about Barito Renewables,
Right.
let's talk about what it all means for you,
Yeah,
the investor.
exactly. Because at the end of the day, that's what this whole deep dive is all about, right?
Right.
We're trying to help you guys make, smart decisions about where you put your money.
Exactly. So I think the first thing to consider is, what kind of investor are you?
Okay.
Are you someone who, really likes high growth potential, even if it means taking on more risk?
Right.
Or are you more, looking for stability, maybe a company that pays good dividends?
Yeah. Are you risk averse? Right, exactly. And Burrito, with their recent IPO and all those acquisitions, they're definitely more on that high growth, higher risk side of things.
For sure, yeah. That debt load, I mean, it's manageable for now,
Yeah,
but it definitely adds, another layer of risk.
it does. And, interest rates are going up everywhere.
Right.
So that can make it harder for them to keep up with those debt payments and stay profitable.
Yeah, definitely something to watch. And we can't forget about, the market.
Right?
Renewable energy is hot right now,
It is.
but that also means it can be volatile. You know, investors get excited, valuations get inflated,
Yeah.
and then things can change really quickly.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So those are all, legitimate
They
concerns.
are.
But the flip side is the potential rewards are pretty big too, right? I mean, Indonesia is on track to become like a geothermal superpower,
Yeah, it is.
and Burrito's in a great position to, ride that wave.
They are. And like we said, they've got those long-term contracts with PLN,
Right.
which is a big deal,
Yeah.
in terms of stability.
Yeah, for sure. That kind of predictability is really valuable, especially compared to, other renewable energy sources like solar or wind.
Right, which are so dependent on the weather.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting mix of factors, right?
It is.
If you're looking for exposure to clean energy and you're okay with, a little bit of risk,
Right.
Burrito could be a good option for you.
Yeah, and this is a big but. You got to do your homework.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You can't just, base your decisions on what we're saying here.
No, not at all. You need to, really dig into their financials yourself.
Right.
Look closely at those debt covenants.
Yeah.
Compare their valuation to, other companies in the industry.
Exactly. Don't just take our word for it.
Right, right. Do your own research.
And speaking of research, I think it's really important to pay attention to how they handle these new companies they're acquiring.
Oh, absolutely.
Integration can be really messy, and it can make or break a company.
It really can. And, on top of that, you need to keep an eye on the regulatory environment.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Governments have a huge influence on the renewable energy sector.
Right.
So any changes in policies or incentives in Indonesia, those could have a big impact on Burrito.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It seems like with any company that's growing this fast, there's always this, kind of tension between
Yeah.
risk and potential reward.
Right.
It's all about finding, the right balance for you, for your investment goals, and how much risk you're comfortable with.
Exactly. And that's where, doing your research really comes in.
For sure.
There's no magic formula in investing.
Right. You got to figure out what works for you.
Mm.
One thing that really caught my eye in Burrito's annual report was their commitment to like employee training and development.
Oh, yeah, I noticed that too. They're
Well-
putting a lot of resources into their workforce.
Yeah.
They're even partnering with some big names like INSEAD and Cornell University.
Right.
I think that says a lot about, their long-term vision.
It does, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the geothermal industry, it's not easy, right? It requires a lot of specialized skills.
It does.
So by investing in their people, Burrito's really building a strong foundation, for the future.
Yeah, I agree. It's not just about, riding this current wave of renewable energy hype.
Right.
It's about developing the expertise they need to be a leader in this industry for years to come.
And that's always reassuring to see as an investor.
It is.
A company that invests in its people is a company that's thinking about the long term.
Absolutely. It's a sign that they're not just focused on, making a quick buck.
Yeah,
They're building a sustainable business, one that can weather the storms.
exactly. Okay, so we've looked at their financials, their growth strategy, even their approach to, human capital.
Right,
But what about their competition?
right. You can't forget about the competitive landscape.
Exactly. So who are the big players, that Burrito's up against?
Well, the biggest one is Pertamina Geothermal Energy,
Okay.
or PGE, as they're known. They're state-owned. They've been around forever.
Right.
They have a huge chunk of the market.
That's a tough competitor.
Yeah, they're a force to be reckoned with. But, Burrito's not exactly a newcomer either.
Right.
They're part of the Burrito Pacific Group, which has a long history in the Indonesian energy
Yeah,
sector.
that's true.
And their green consolidation strategy, that's helping them catch up pretty quickly.
They're the second largest geothermal player in Indonesia right now, right?
Yeah, right behind PGE. Pretty impressive.
It is. It is. But they can't get complacent, right?
Mm.
There are other companies out there.
Oh, yeah, there are definitely others. There's Supreme Energy.
Okay.
They're privately owned, and they've been growing pretty fast.
Right.
And then you're starting to see some international companies coming in as well,
Oh, interesting.
attracted by the growth potential and all the incentives the government's offering.
Yeah. It's a hot market.
It is, for sure. So it's a dynamic landscape, very competitive.
But Burrito seems to be holding their own.
Yeah, they are. They've got the experience, the partnerships, the operational excellence.
And that commitment to safety, like we talked about.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That Zero Accident Award, it shows how seriously they take operational rigor, which is crucial in an industry like this.
Yeah, you don't want any accidents when you're dealing with geothermal energy.
No, you don't. Of course, every company has challenges,
Yes,
right?
they do.
We talked about their debt and
Yeah.
how they need to manage that carefully.
Yeah,
And they're going to have to stay flexible, adapt to the changing market.
absolutely. So I guess what we're saying is there's no easy answer here.
Right.
Investing is all about weighing the risks and the potential rewards.
Exactly. There's no such thing as a guaranteed win.
And that's why it's so important to do your research.
Right.
You need to look at everything, the financials, the growth strategy, the competition, even the company's culture and values,
Yeah, the whole picture.
to really make an informed decision.
It's about finding companies that, fit with your values, your risk tolerance, your vision for the future.
And who knows, maybe Barito Renewables is that company for you.
Maybe it is.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up this part, I want to bring up something that we haven't really talked about directly,
Okay.
but it's really important when you're thinking about the long-term prospects of a company like Barito Renewables.
I'm intrigued. What is it?
It's the social and environmental impact of geothermal energy itself.
Ah, right.
Hmm.
We've been focusing on, Burrito's business,
Right.
but we haven't really talked about the bigger picture. How does the energy source they're using, how does that affect the world around them?
Exactly. And it does affect the world in both good ways and bad ways.
Right. Geothermal is often seen as this clean, sustainable alternative.
It is.
But it's important to remember that no energy source is completely without impact.
That's true. There are always trade-offs. So in the next part, we're going to dig into that. We're going to look at the environmental concerns, the social impacts, all of that. And we'll talk about what you, the investor, should be considering when you're evaluating a company's commitment to, responsible geothermal development.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it. Okay, so we're back. And we're really diving into this whole, social and environmental impact of geothermal energy. It's one thing to crunch the numbers and look at financials and all that, but
Right.
we gotta look at the bigger picture too, right? Like, how do these companies actually affect the world around them?
Yeah, exactly. Geothermal's often, touted as this clean, green solution.
It is.
But like anything, it's got its complexities. No energy source is perfect.
Right, right. So let's break it down a bit. Like, what are some of the, environmental pluses of geothermal? Why is it considered, a good alternative?
Well, the main thing is geothermal plants don't burn fossil fuels.
Okay.
So you're not releasing those, nasty greenhouse gases directly into the atmosphere. No carbon dioxide, no methane, that kind of thing.
So good for fighting climate change.
Exactly. Yeah. And unlike solar and wind, which can be kind of, finicky depending on the weather,
Right. Unreliable?
geothermal provides a consistent baseload power supply,
Yeah, it's always on.
which is huge, as we try to move towards a cleaner grid.
Absolutely. But like you said, no energy source is completely impact-free.
Right, right.
So what are some of those, potential downsides we need to be aware of with geothermal?
Well, you still need land to build these plants.
Right.
And the construction process can be disruptive, to ecosystems. There's also, potential noise pollution.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get small releases of greenhouse gases from deep underground.
Right. It's not perfect.
Eh.
So how can geothermal companies, kind of minimize those negative impacts, make sure they're doing things responsibly?
Well, careful site selection is a big one.
Okay.
Making sure they're building in the right places. And then, using the best practices for drilling and construction.
Yeah, and reducing their footprint as
Right.
much as possible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And having good environmental monitoring programs in place.
So they can catch problems early on.
Exactly. Yeah. They got to be proactive about minimizing their impact.
And what about the communities where these plants are built? How do they make sure, everyone benefits, not just the companies?
Yeah, that's so important. Being transparent, communicating openly with the locals.
Right. Building trust.
Exactly. They need to be upfront about the potential impacts, both good and bad.
Yeah. And involve people in the decision-making process.
For sure. That way you get buy-in, and geothermal development can be, sustainable and equitable.
Okay, now one thing that always comes up with geothermal is the risk of earthquakes, right?
Yeah, induced seismicity.
Right, where, injecting wastewater underground can trigger tremors.
It's a real concern, but if it's managed properly, the risk can be reduced significantly.
Okay, so how do they do that?
Again, careful site selection is key. You got to pick the right location.
Right.
And then robust engineering practices, Make sure those wells are designed and built properly. And then really sophisticated monitoring systems to detect any, seismic activity early on.
So basically being really careful and using the best technology available.
Yeah, exactly. And companies like Barito, they're committed to doing things right.
They have a good track record.
They do, yeah. Safety is a top priority for them.
Okay, so for the investor out there, someone who's thinking about putting their money into a geothermal company,
Right.
what are some red flags or maybe some green flags to look for? Like, how do you know if a company is really serious about sustainability?
Don't just take their word for it.
Right.
Look at their actions. Read their sustainability reports. See what they're actually doing.
Okay.
Research their community engagement.
Yeah.
Are they actually talking to people? Look at their policies on environmental protection and social impact.
So looking beyond just like the marketing and the PR.
Absolutely. Look for concrete evidence. Are they going above and beyond the minimum requirements? Are they, really trying to reduce their impact? Are they transparent about what they're doing, both the good and the bad? Those are the signs of a company that's, walking the walk.
Yeah, putting their money where their mouth is.
Exactly. It's about aligning your investments with your values, right? If you care about clean energy, a sustainable future, you want to support companies that are actually making a difference.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into Barito Renewables. We've learned a lot about their financials, their growth strategy, their competitive landscape,
Right.
and of course the whole, big picture of geothermal energy.
It's a complex industry, that's for sure. And Burrito's right there, leading the charge.
They are. And as always, the decision to invest or not is a personal one.
Absolutely.
Do your research, weigh the risks and rewards, and see if Barito fits with your goals.
And your
And your values. Exactly.
Yeah.
We hope this deep dive has given you, the information you need to make that decision.
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
So until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep investing in a brighter future. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.